notify you if your supporting utilities are having problems. The stability and availability of your physical systems are critical to protecting the data stored on or transmitted by them. Physical security issues like poorly managed equipment, damaged cables, and disruptions caused by failures in supporting utilities can lead to significant data loss. In this video, I'll cover 4 physical security controls from ISO 27001 that are designed to protect against these types of threats. We'll start with Control 7.11, Supporting Utilities. This requires your organization to protect equipment from power failures or disruptions caused by failures at supporting utilities. Supporting utilities might include electricity, telecommunications, water supply, gas, sewage, and ventilation and air conditioning providers. Protection steps your organization could take include: inspect and test the services provided by supporting utilities regularly to ensure they are functioning properly. Appraise supporting utilities regularly for their capacity to meet business growth and interactions with other supporting utilities. Consider configuring multiple feeds from supporting utilities with diverse physical routing, and set up alarms to notify you if your supporting utilities are having problems. Cabling security is Control 7.12. The requirement is for your organization to protect cables carrying power, data, or supporting information services from interception, interference, or damage. Some recommendations from ISO 27002 include running cables underground if possible, segregating power cables from communications cables to prevent interference, and controlling access to patch panels and cable rooms. The next control is 7.13, Equipment Maintenance. Here, your organization is required to maintain equipment correctly to ensure the availability, integrity, and confidentiality of information. Ways that you can achieve this include following the supplier's maintenance recommendations for the equipment, only using authorized maintenance personnel for repairs, and checking that the equipment is functioning properly after maintenance before putting it back into operation. Speaking of good equipment management practices, our last control is 7.14, Secure Disposal or Reuse of Equipment. It requires your organization to verify that all sensitive data or licensed software has been securely removed or wiped from all storage media before disposal or reuse. With hard drives and other storage media, just deleting the data isn't enough. Consider using a secure media destruction service for disposal of hard drives, CDs, DVDs, and other media. Use whole disk encryption or secure wipe software when possible before destroying or repurposing equipment. You can demonstrate compliance with these controls by writing and following a physical security policy that requires your organization to comply with these controls, and providing evidence that the appropriate physical security controls are in place. If your organization isn't already regularly inspecting and testing the services, stability and availability of your physical systems are critical to protecting the data stored on or transmitted by them. Physical security issues like poorly managed equipment, damaged cables, and disruptions caused by failures in supporting utilities can lead to significant data loss. In this video, I'll cover 4 physical security controls from ISO 27001 that are designed to protect against these types of threats. We'll start with Control 7.11, Supporting Utilities. This requires your organization to protect equipment from power failures or disruptions caused by failures at supporting utilities. Supporting utilities might include electricity, telecommunications, water supply, gas, sewage, and ventilation and air conditioning providers. Protection steps your organization could take include: inspect and test the services provided by supporting utilities regularly to ensure they are functioning properly. Appraise supporting utilities regularly for their capacity to meet business growth and interactions with other supporting utilities. Consider configuring multiple feeds from supporting utilities with diverse physical routing, and set up alarms to notify you if your supporting utilities are having problems. Cabling security is Control 7.12. The requirement is for your organization to protect cables carrying power, data, or supporting information services from interception, interference, or damage. Some recommendations from ISO 27002 include running cables underground if possible, segregating power cables from communications cables to prevent interference, and controlling access to patch panels and cable rooms. The next control is 7.13, Equipment Maintenance. Here, your organization is required to maintain equipment correctly to ensure the availability, integrity, and confidentiality of information. Ways that you can achieve this include following the supplier's maintenance recommendations for the equipment, only using authorized maintenance personnel for repairs, and checking that the equipment is functioning properly after maintenance before putting it back into operation. Speaking of good equipment management practices, our last control is 7.14, Secure Disposal or Reuse of Equipment. It requires your organization to verify that all sensitive data or licensed software has been securely removed or wiped from all storage media before disposal or reuse. With hard drives and other storage media, just deleting the data isn't enough. Consider using a secure media destruction service for disposal of hard drives, CDs, DVDs, and other media. Use whole disk encryption or secure wipe software when possible before destroying or repurposing equipment. You can demonstrate compliance with these controls by writing and following a physical security policy that requires your organization to comply with these controls, and providing evidence that the appropriate physical security controls are in place. If your organization isn't already regularly inspecting and testing the services provided by supporting utilities, take a moment to think about how you could get that process started. Doing that and following the other practices I covered in this video will help protect your organization from disruptions and data loss, as well as comply with controls 7.11 through 7.14 of ISO 27001. In today's digital age, computer networks are where the majority of information in most organizations can be found. Protecting this information and securing the underlying systems is an important part of the Information Security Management System, or ISMS. In this video, you'll learn about 4 controls from ISO 27001 that will help your organization improve its network security. First is Control 8.20, Network Security. It requires your organization to manage and control networks and network devices to protect information in systems and applications. Obviously, this can be a huge area, and there are many possible controls. And ISO 27001 doesn't provide specific network controls. In ISO 27002, though, you'll find high-level guidance, such as establishing responsibilities and procedures for the management of network equipment, establishing special controls for data passing over public or wireless networks, logging and monitoring actions that could impact information security, authenticating systems that access the network, and restricting systems that could access the network. Refer to ISO 27002 for more suggested controls. For the definitive reference, though, you might want to check out ISO IEC 27033, which is the official standard for IT network security. The next control is 8.21, Security of Network Services. It requires your organization to identify, implement, and monitor security mechanisms, service levels, and service requirements of network services. So when you think about network services, consider services like the provision of network connections, firewalls, and intrusion detection systems. For instance, if your organization has an intrusion detection system that a third party manages, make sure you identify the security mechanisms, service levels, and service requirements for that service. With a third-party service, these may be included in the master service agreement contract between your organization and theirs. Even if a team within your organization provides the network service, you still need to identify the security mechanisms, service levels, and service requirements for those services. Requirements for the use of network services could include which networks and network services are allowed to be accessed, authentication requirements for accessing network services, authorization procedures for granting access to networks and network services, and monitoring the use of network services. The next control is Control 8.22, Segregation of Networks. It requires your organization to segregate groups of information services, users, and information systems in your organization's networks. The idea here is to divide your larger network using security boundaries to control traffic between the groups based on business needs. Divide large networks into separate domains based on levels of trust, criticality, and sensitivity. For example, your organization can segregate public wireless networks from the internal network, user systems from the servers, and the finance domain from all other domains. You should conduct a risk assessment to determine the best network segregation options for your organization. Our final network security management control is 8.23, web filtering. It requires your organization to manage access to external websites to reduce exposure to malicious content. The purpose of this control is to protect systems from being compromised by malware and to prevent access to unauthorized web resources. Types of websites your organization should consider blocking include known or suspected malicious websites, such as those distributing malware or phishing content, command and control servers, malicious websites identified from threat intelligence, and websites sharing illegal content. You can demonstrate compliance with these network security management controls by documenting the network controls you have in place, such as access control lists, authentication systems, and network and log monitoring, documenting network services and the security controls, service levels, and management requirements associated with them, segregating your network into separate domains with appropriate security controls, and identifying unauthorized websites and implementing controls to block them. Take a moment to think about the security of your organization's networks and the controls I covered in this video. If you know of any that are missing in your organization, consider what steps you can take to help bring it closer to compliance. A key component of system and network security is protecting your information systems from a wide variety of threats, some of which may be obvious and others which may be less apparent. In this video, I'll cover 4 controls from ISO 27001 that are designed to help safeguard your information systems. The first control is 8.7, Protection against malware. It requires your organization to implement protection against malware and support it with appropriate user awareness. ISO 27002 has a lot of recommendations for malware controls that your organization should consider, including installing and regularly updating malware detection and repair software on all systems, implementing rules and controls to prevent or detect the use of unauthorized software, blocking known or suspected malicious websites, and providing user training on how to identify and protect against malware. Refer to ISO 27002 for more guidance on protecting against malware. Our next control is 8.18, Use of Privileged Utility Programs, and it requires your organization to restrict and tightly control the use of utility programs that can be used to override system and application controls. The purpose of this control is to reduce the risk of utility programs being used as backdoors to gain unauthorized access to systems and applications. Examples of utility programs on Windows systems that should be controlled include registry editors, PowerShell, Computer Manager, or any system tool or utility that requires admin privileges to work. You can accomplish control of privileged utility programs by removing or disabling all unnecessary utility programs, limiting the use of utility programs to trusted and authorized users, requiring unique user identification when using utility programs, and logging the use of utility programs. A sometimes overlooked aspect of information systems protection is the development of applications by third-party vendors. This brings us to outsourced development, Control 8.30. It requires your organization to supervise and monitor the activity of outsourced system development. This control is crucial for protecting information systems because it ensures the implementation of necessary measures to secure software and applications developed by external parties. To accomplish this, consider doing the following: contractually require secure design, coding, and testing practices, have the developer provide evidence that the code has been tested for malicious content and vulnerabilities, and include in the contract with your supplier the right to audit their development processes and controls. System audits are a necessary part of any good security program, but sometimes audit tests are disruptive and they can feel like an attack from enemy forces if they're not properly managed. So ISO 27001 includes Control 8.34, Protection of Information Systems during audit testing, and it requires your organization to collaboratively plan and agree upon the audit test requirements for operational systems with both the tester and appropriate management. When you think of audits that should be planned and controlled, think about penetration tests, third-party security reviews, certification reviews, and other types of potentially disruptive audits. If these audits are done improperly, they can impact user productivity or even cause system outages. ISO 27002 suggests many controls for information systems audits, including clearly defining the scope of the audit, ensuring that auditors only have read-only access to data, establishing the security requirements of the auditor's testing devices, logging of auditor activity, and conducting audits that could affect system availability outside of business hours. You can demonstrate compliance with these controls by installing anti-malware software on all systems to detect and quarantine suspected malware, conducting regular user awareness training on the topic of malware and how to protect against it, developing a plan to recover from malware attacks, restricting the use of privileged utility programs in accordance with the guidance for Control 8.18, contractually requiring third-party developers to follow secure design, coding, and testing practices, and documenting all the controls your organization has in place for information systems audits. If your organization isn't already complying with some or all of these controls, take a moment to think about which compliance steps you can take first to strengthen your information system security and proactively defend against potential threats. Security threats are everywhere, ever-changing, and persistent, with new ones continually emerging to challenge your organization's defenses. In this video, we'll look at two controls in ISO 27001 that work together to help protect against these threats. The first control is 5.7, Threat Intelligence. It requires your organization to collect and analyze information relating to security threats to produce threat intelligence. The purpose of this control is to provide awareness of your organization's threat environment so you can take the appropriate mitigation actions. Guidance from ISO 27002 recommends taking this approach. Collect and analyze threat intelligence. Gather and analyze information on existing or emerging threats to prevent harm and reduce the impact on your organization. Divide intelligence into layers. Segment threat intelligence into strategic, tactical, and operational layers, making sure it's relevant, insightful, contextual, and actionable. Establish and implement intelligence activities and usage. Create processes for the production, collection, analysis, and sharing of threat intelligence, including integrating it into security risk management and technical controls. Share and collaborate on threat information. Mutually share threat intelligence with other organizations to improve overall understanding and defense against threats. A good source for free threat intelligence is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. Just go to CISA.gov and search for Subscribe to Updates. That should lead you to a page where you can get threat intelligence updates through RSS feeds, social media, and email. Another source of threat intelligence is by joining an Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or ISAC. These are industry-specific organizations where all members agree to share information about the latest threats they're seeing. There's a fee to join an ISAC, though. No matter how strong your information security program is, your organization's systems will still end up with technical vulnerabilities, potentially opening doors to threats. Good security isn't about having zero vulnerabilities, it's about how you manage the vulnerabilities you have. That brings us to Control 8.8 of ISO 27001, Management of Technical Vulnerabilities. This control has a three-pronged requirement. It requires your organization to obtain information about vulnerabilities in systems used by your organization in a timely manner, evaluate those vulnerabilities to determine your organization's exposure to risk, and take appropriate steps to minimize that risk. ISO 27002 has a lot of implementation guidance that goes with this control, and my recommendation is to implement a formal vulnerability management program that aligns with that guidance. Such a vulnerability management program could include conducting vulnerability scans, analyzing the results of the vulnerability scans, including the associated risks, remediating vulnerabilities in order of severity of the risk. If patches exist for the vulnerabilities, test them, and patch systems to remediate the security vulnerabilities. Refer to ISO 27002 for more details about what should be included in your organization's vulnerability management program. You can demonstrate compliance with these controls by collecting and analyzing threat intelligence, creating processes to integrate threat intelligence into security risk management and technical controls, and implementing a formal vulnerability management program that complies with ISO 27002 recommendations for Control 8.8. In today's cyber threat landscape, proactively managing vulnerabilities and staying informed about the latest threats is vital. Protecting your systems is an ongoing process. Take the necessary steps today to strengthen your organization's security posture for tomorrow. If you haven't already, visit CISA.gov today to subscribe to updates, consider joining an industry-specific ISAC, and start building a vulnerability management program tailored to your organization's needs. It's too bad that operational systems can't be purchased with perfect security configurations right from the start and have those configurations remain static forever. That would make the life of security professionals so much easier. Of course, the reality is quite different. Operational systems won't be secure on day one, and users might try to modify security configurations, introduce unauthorized software, or even overlook crucial settings like cryptography for information protection. In this video, we'll cover 3 ISO 27001 controls designed to help your organization effectively manage security configurations for operational systems. The first control is 8.9, Configuration Management. It requires your organization to establish, document, implement, monitor, and review configurations of hardware, software, services, and networks. The purpose of this control is to ensure that your operational systems function correctly with required security settings and that unauthorized or incorrect changes do not alter configurations. To accomplish this, guidance from ISO 27002 recommends defining and implementing processes and tools to enforce required configurations for all operational systems, creating secure configuration templates, these can be called hardening standards, monitor configurations using system management tools. If your system configurations deviate from your standards, follow processes to bring them back into compliance promptly, and regularly review and update templates to address new threats and new software or hardware versions. Refer to ISO 27002 for more recommendations to comply with this control. What if anybody in your organization could install whatever software they wanted on your operational systems? As you might imagine, that could lead to all sorts of problems. This brings us to Control 8.19, Installation of Software on Operational Systems. It requires your organization to implement procedures and measures to securely manage software installation on operational systems. The purpose of this control is to ensure the integrity of operational systems and prevent the exploitation of technical vulnerabilities. ISO 27002 has a lot of recommendations on procedures your organization could implement, including requiring that software installation is only done by trained administrators, software is only installed after testing, a rollback strategy is in place for times when software installations go wrong, and old versions of software are retained in case they need to be reinstalled. Implementing and managing encryption is a vital security configuration for operational systems. Without cryptography, sensitive data and communications become vulnerable to unauthorized access and exploitation. So our third control is 8.24, Use of Cryptography. It requires your organization to define and implement rules for the effective use of cryptography, including cryptographic key management. The purpose of this control is to ensure the proper use of cryptography to protect information based on business and security needs, while also following legal and regulatory requirements. ISO 27002 recommends writing a security policy that defines how your organization uses cryptographic controls to protect information. Your cryptographic controls policy should define when your organization requires the use of cryptography, acceptable encryption algorithms, rules for key management, including generation, protection, and recovery, and who is responsible for implementing the policy and managing the keys. Refer to ISO 27002 for more recommendations about what should be included in this policy. You should note that there may be regulations that restrict the use of cryptographic controls in your country or jurisdiction. Make sure you understand if any of these restrictions apply to your organization. Speaking of key management, ISO 27002 recommends using a key management system, or KMS, to manage how cryptographic keys are generated, issued, obtained, distributed, stored, changed and updated, handled if compromised, revoked, recovered, backed up or archived, and destroyed. Your organization should also establish clear procedures for logging and auditing key management activities, as well as setting activation and deactivation dates for keys to only allow them to be used for a limited time. For extra insight on this topic, you can also refer to ISO IEC Standard 11770, Key Management. This is the official requirement for how cryptographic keys should be managed. You can demonstrate compliance with these secure configuration controls by defining and applying hardening standards for all operational systems, monitoring the configurations of your systems and ensuring they stay compliant with your hardening standards, documenting procedures to control the installation of software on your operational systems, keeping records of any software changes and installations conducted by your organization, writing and enforcing a policy on the use of cryptographic controls, and writing and enforcing a policy or standard on the use and protection of cryptographic keys throughout their entire life cycle. Consider your organization's current practices in configuration management, secure software installation, and cryptographic controls as they compare to the controls covered in this video. Take steps today to make any necessary improvements to help your organization align with these ISO 27001 requirements. You may know the term DevSecOps, which emphasizes how software development, security, and operations should work together. Well, controls 8.25 through 8.28 from ISO 27001 are focused on the same concept, and that's what you'll learn about in this video. The first control is 8.25, Secure Development Lifecycle. It requires your organization to establish and apply rules to securely develop software and systems. The purpose of this control is to ensure that information security is designed and implemented within the secure development lifecycle of software and systems. The best way to accomplish this is to write a secure development policy. Your policy should require integration of security within the software development lifecycle, incorporation of security requirements into the specification and design phase, clear separation of development, test, and production environments, comprehensive system and security testing such as regression testing, code scan, and penetration tests, and secure repositories for source code and configuration management. Refer to ISO 27002 for more recommendations of what should be included in your secure development policy. Every application is different, which means they'll have different security requirements. Control 8.26, Application Security Requirements, requires your organization to identify, specify, and approve information security requirements when developing or acquiring applications. The best way to identify the security requirements for your applications is to conduct a risk assessment. Examples of application security requirements may include verifying the level of trust for the identities of entities, such as through authentication, identification and classification of information to be processed by the application, safeguarding confidential information, protection of data in processing, transit, and storage, and building resilience against malicious attacks or unintended disruptions, such as protection against buffer overflow or SQL injections. There are many more examples of application security requirements in ISO 27002, so I encourage you to review them when identifying the security requirements for your organization's applications. The following control is Secure System Architecture and Engineering Principles, Control 8.27. It requires your organization to establish, document, maintain, and apply principles for engineering secure systems to any information system development activities. The purpose of this control is to ensure your information systems are securely designed, implemented, and operated throughout the entire development lifecycle. ISO 27002 recommends considering the following as secure system architecture and engineering principles: implementing comprehensive security controls against identified threats, tailoring security controls like encryption and digital signing for specific business processes, integrating security architecture principles like defense in depth and least privilege, adopting zero trust principles for heightened security assurance, and implementing dynamic access controls that evaluate the context of each access request for more accurate authorization. The last secure development control is 8.28, Secure Coding. As the title says, this control requires your organization to apply secure coding principles to software development. The purpose of this control is to ensure that software is written securely, which reduces the number of potential information security vulnerabilities in the software. ISO 27002 recommends defining secure coding principles and rules during all stages of the software lifecycle. A good way to accomplish this is to add these principles and rules to the secure development policy you'll write for Control 8.25, which I mentioned earlier. For example, in the planning and before coding stage, developers must ensure that their development tools, such as their integrated development environments or IDEs, are correctly configured to support secure code creation. During coding, developers should adopt secure programming techniques like pair programming, refactoring, peer review, security iterations, and test-driven development. After coding, static application security tests, or SAST, should be conducted on code to identify any security vulnerabilities in the software. And in the review and maintenance stage, any reported information security vulnerabilities must be handled promptly. To demonstrate compliance with these controls, your organization should conduct thorough risk assessments to identify and assess the risks associated with its applications, identify and specify information security requirements for its applications, document the implementation of appropriate controls to address the identified information security requirements, document your organization's application security requirements and secure system engineering principles, and write, publish, and enforce a secure development policy. Incorporating strong security practices throughout the software development lifecycle is essential to reduce vulnerabilities and create a more secure digital environment. If your organization doesn't already have a secure development policy, consider collaborating with your development team to write one that aligns with ISO 27001. Imagine that your organization is about to release a critical software update. How can you be sure that the update doesn't inadvertently introduce vulnerabilities or expose sensitive data? This is where controls 8.29, 8.31, and 8.32 from ISO 27001 come into play. These controls define security practices throughout the application development lifecycle, which I'll cover in this video. Control 8.29 is security testing in development and acceptance. It requires your organization to define and implement security testing processes in the development lifecycle. The purpose of this control is to validate if information security requirements are met during the deployment of applications or code to the production environment. This testing should be done for new information systems, upgrades, and new versions. ISO 27002 includes this guidance for conducting security testing in development. Conduct security testing against specified requirements and integrate it into the testing of both systems and components. Ensure security testing covers security functions such as user authentication, access restrictions, and cryptography, secure coding practices, and secure configurations, including operating systems, firewalls, and other security components. Tailor test plans based on specific criteria and keep testing proportional to the importance and nature of the system being built or modified. And leverage automated tools such as code analysis tools or vulnerability scanners and verify that security-related defects are remediated. All applications should go through an acceptance process, and that should include security testing too. ISO 27002 recommends conducting independent acceptance testing to confirm that the system is behaving as expected. Consider including these tests during the acceptance process. Code review to detect security flaws, unanticipated inputs and conditions. Vulnerability scanning to find insecure configurations and system vulnerabilities. And penetration testing to uncover insecure code and design. These tests should be conducted in a test environment closely resembling the production environment to ensure that the system doesn't introduce vulnerabilities into your organization's environment. And of course, any security defects should be remediated prior to deploying the system to production. Speaking of test environments, the next control is 8.31, separation of development, test, and production environments. The process of developing and testing software can cause problems for production systems if they're being done on the same system or in the same environment. So this control is designed to help reduce these risks. It requires your organization to separate and secure development, testing, and production environments to reduce the likelihood of unauthorized access or changes to the production environment and data. To achieve this, ISO 27001 recommends separating the development and production systems by operating them in different logical or physical domains, controlling access to the environments and preventing a single person from having the ability to make changes to both development and production without prior review and approval, documenting and enforcing clear rules for deploying software from development to production, ensuring proper authorization procedures are in place, testing changes to production systems in the testing environment only, and limiting access to developer tools like compilers, editors, and utility programs, monitor environment changes, and track code alterations. Our last application security control is 8.32, change management. It requires your organization to follow change management principles when making changes to information processing facilities and information systems. This is designed to preserve information security when executing changes. Change control procedures should be enforced throughout the entire system development lifecycle, from system design through system maintenance. Your organization should write down its change control procedures. This could be in the form of a change management policy. ISO 27002 recommends including the following change control procedures. Plan and assess the impact of changes, taking into account all dependencies. Obtain proper authorization before implementing changes. Test changes and ensure they meet predefined acceptance criteria. Modify operating documentation and user procedures as needed to reflect the changes accurately. And maintain detailed records of all changes. Refer to ISO 27002 for more recommended change control procedures. You can demonstrate compliance with these controls by documenting the security testing processes your organization follows throughout the application development lifecycle, documenting security defects found and remediated, logically or physically separating development, test, and production environments, and documenting your change control procedures and writing a change management policy. Following these application security controls will help protect your systems against vulnerabilities and unauthorized access. If your organization hasn't yet integrated these controls, consider collaborating with your development team to drive the necessary changes and establish processes that will align with ISO 27001. Congratulations! You've completed the course on the Annex A controls of ISO 27001. Great job, and thank you for joining me. You've learned about all 93 Annex A controls of this internationally recognized standard. You understand what these controls require and ways you can demonstrate compliance with each of them. You should have a good idea of the scope and magnitude of these controls and the level of effort that would be involved in implementing them in your organization. If you want your organization to comply with ISO 27001, here are the steps that I recommend you take. First, go to the ISO.org website and buy the official ISO 27001 and 27002 standards. You'll be referencing these constantly on your compliance journey. Next, if you haven't already, watch Part 1 of this course, Getting Started. There are important compliance steps that are covered in Part 1 that you don't want to skip. Also, follow the action plan from Part 1 to help guide you through the compliance process. Finally, use the checklist you'll find in the handouts for this video. It will help you track your progress as you work your way through the controls. Building an ISO 27001 compliant cybersecurity program might seem overwhelming, but you can get it done if you break it down into manageable pieces. For more on this subject and other cybersecurity topics, check out my other LinkedIn Learning courses. Feel free to drop questions into the Q&A field and connect with me on LinkedIn. I wish you the best of success on your exciting journey to building an ISO 27001 compliant cybersecurity program.